Something feels off in the comic book community. The X-Men are really big again. There's a giant Carnage event happening right now. Marvel didn't recently announce, I don't know, a Morbius series, did they? Oh my god! I somehow time traveled back to the 1990s! I have to warn everyone about Napster! And, like, 200 other things that are way more important than that. Hey everyone, it's Aaron, and this is Comic Class, the show on this channel where we just geek out about comic books. But before we start talking about Absolute Carnage, as I said, we do have a couple of real quick announcements to get through. First big announcement, as I said last week, this episode was originally going to be a Patreon exclusive. But then I realized that nothing big was really coming out this week, so I didn't really have anything to talk about. I guess we could have talked about Gwenpool Strikes Back. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Maybe a little bit too all over the place, maybe a little bit too jokey. You know, tap it back like 10%. I think you'll be at about the right area in there. That's all the talking I have to do about that. So yeah, I didn't really have anything else to talk about this week. So I decided to ask the people over on Patreon what they thought, and what we're going to do instead is that today we're going to talk about Absolute Carnage here on the main channel, and if you are a Patreon subscriber, then next week I'm going to talk about the most recent 2 issues of House of X and Power of X, because you guys seem to really love me doing that. And after reading this week's Power of X, I again have a bunch of really weird conspiracy theories. So, the next big announcement that I need to make, if you guys are a fan of hearing me talk about comic book characters, but you think to yourself, gee, I wish you could talk about comic book characters not in comic books, in some other medium, we do have a video game channel called Thorgy's Arcade, and just yesterday we put up our review of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. I don't normally come in here that much and promote all this stuff over on the gaming channel. I really should, but I don't do it that often. However, I figure since it does relate to comic books, you guys might be interested in hearing my thoughts about Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. If you guys want to see that, then a card will be popping up for it right now. I will also put a link at the end of this video. And last big announcement to get out of the way before we start talking about today's episode. If you are in the New York area this weekend, I'm actually going to be at FlameCon. FlameCon is an annual convention that focuses on characters and fandoms and creators in the LGBTQ community. My wife is going to have a booth there selling her art. I'm going to be at the booth with her. So if you want to come and say hi to either of us, that's where we will be this weekend. So there you go. Now is time to start talking about Big Red Murder Spider-Man. There's really no good way to transition from self-promotion into Carnage, so instead I decided to make it as awkward as possible. That's my style. Now, going into this, I was a little bit torn, because on the one hand, I absolutely love Donny Cates, and I have been loving his run on Venom. I think that his Venom book is fantastic. In fact, I was not looking forward to Eddie Brock coming back as Venom. I kept looking at that going, man, Flash Thompson is so much more interesting. They were doing such better stuff with Flash Thompson as Venom. And listen, man, Eddie Brock, he had his time. It's time to move on from that. But Donny Cates came in here, and he has crafted a truly amazing Venom series. Granted, almost everything he has done in that book really feels like he had it planned for Flash Thompson, but he rolled with what he had, and he still managed to make it work. And yeah, this has been a wonderful Venom series. So, okay, on the one hand, Donny Cates, his Venom run really good, and also, yes, it is a major event. However, it's not one of those, well, we really just kind of need to have some kind of an event this week. Oh, shoot, what can we do? Let's just throw something together at the last minute. No, this is something he has been building up to since the start of his run. Since he introduced Null, the god of the symbiotes, we've all been sitting here wondering, okay, what's that going to lead to? We got the introduction. What's the next step? This is the next step. This is what this has been leading towards. Yeah, I love when they have big event books that actually have a lead up to them, actually have a build up of some importance. That's awesome. So that's exactly what's happening here. Why was I torn on it? Because this is a Carnage event, and I loved Carnage when I was a kid. Carnage was one of my absolute favorite comic book villains. It's been a long time since I had that opinion of Carnage. Carnage to me started out as, oh man, he's like Venom, but he doesn't have any of Venom's morals. He doesn't have that code that Venom has. He's just purely insane. He's the really bad version of Venom, and Venom was already the bad version of Spider-Man, so oh man, he's even worse. And he's this crazy serial killer, so he was dangerous even without the symbiote, and the symbiote's even stronger than Venom, and it turns into all these knives and sharp weapons that Venom doesn't. Oh man, that's so unique. And he's crazy. Venom's got his stuff together, but Carnage, oh man, he is just completely nuts. I remember when I was a kid, they released, back before Max Comics was a thing, they put out 2 Carnage one-shots that just said, for mature audiences. And I was a kid, and yet my comic book store didn't care. They let me buy it anyways. I remember reading one of those, and I started to get physically ill. I'm thinking about it right now, and I can feel like my throat's starting to swell up like, yeah, no, yeah, Carnage, he was an interesting character. That's what I felt about him when I was a kid. But the older I got, the more I started to look at him as like, okay, yeah, you're crazy. What else is there to you? Like, yeah, you're the crazy serial killer version. Are you crazy like the Joker where there's a big mystery? No big mystery or anything. You're not like manipulative and some madman who has this genius level IQ and we gotta worry about what you're gonna do. No, you're just crazy killer man with a lot of knives coming out of your hands. Okay, all right. And yeah, it didn't have the impact on me anymore. I didn't find it interesting anymore. So yeah, I kind of fell off the Carnage bus. Carnage Bus, an amazing name for a band if anybody out there is trying to figure out one. Another thing that had me kind of torn on this is that you look at the title, Absolute Carnage. You look at all the tie-ins and the characters who are going to be involved in this. It's really obvious. This is supposed to be a big nostalgia tie-back to Maximum Carnage back in the 90s. And hey man, I loved Maximum Carnage when I was a kid. I read the comics. I remember going to comic book shows and searching through everybody's long boxes from all around the country to find every single issue of that big event. Oh man, that was one of those first big events I ever got really into in comics, where I had to read every single part of it. Which granted, back then if you had to read every single part of it, it would be a 12-issue long storyline, and that would be it. And 12 issues sounds like a lot, but it would be like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. It wouldn't be part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, and then 12 tie-ins all over the place. So it was a little bit simpler. I could look at the covers and actually go, oh, it says part 5. This is part 5. Did I need part 5? I now have part 5. Check that off. So yeah, I was really into Maximum Carnage. I even played the video game all the time with that bright red cartridge. Oh man, I love that bright red cartridge. So yeah, I had a lot of love for Maximum Carnage as a kid, but it's another one of those things where as I started to fall out of love with Carnage, I started to look back at that, it's like, yeah, okay, it's just fine. It's a fine thing. I mean, it has its place, but I keep looking back at, and one of the reasons why I no longer really have that love for Maximum Carnage is because Maximum Carnage was so 90s. It was 100% 90s. It was, alright, we're just gonna get a bunch of crazy characters with big sharp teeth and knives and claws, and this lady is dressed like she's in Kiss for some reason. You look at every single part of that and it's just like, oh man, this is every single character design from the 90s minus shoulder pads, and it was all them just going nuts in there. And I don't have a lot of love for 90s nostalgia when it comes to comics. I do know there was a lot of good stuff in the 90s, but I also know that when it came to Marvel and DC, or especially Marvel, DC was actually putting out a decent chunk of stuff. When it came to Marvel, if it wasn't the X-Men in the 90s, it was kind of a creative, barren landscape. It was not their highest point. So when I look back at Maximum Carnage, I remember how much I loved it as a kid, but I can't help but just look at it and be reminded of all the bad stuff from the 90s. So yeah, this is going to be an event starring a character I don't really care about, going back to a thing that I didn't really care about, with a crap ton of tie-ins, also starring characters who are just here for basically nothing but 90s nostalgia. I mean, you've got Scream getting a book, you've got the Separation Anxiety team getting a book in there. I remember those books when I was a kid. I remember Separation Anxiety when I was a kid. I remember looking at that thing, and that was like the first time that I got jaded to comic book events. Because I remember loving Maximum Carnage, and then Separation Anxiety was coming around. I was like, oh man, this is going to be the next big Venom and Spider-Man team up. It's going to be huge. And it's also getting a video game tie-in. Oh my goodness, this is going to be great. And man, yeah, it was not great. And I remember looking at that as a kid going, oh wow, this is like, you literally just, it's like you wanted to grab more cash from the people who like Maximum Carnage. It's like you grabbed out for their cash, Is there a word for that? I'm a child at this point, so I don't know these terms just yet. Yeah, that's how I look at separation anxiety. And I'm looking at a lot of these tie-ins going, oh man, it's not so much that you're even trying to reference back to the good event that you did. You're referencing the bad stuff that you did in there too. So yeah, I was kind of nervous about this, but at the same time, it is Donny Cates. And as I started this thing by saying, I didn't really care about Eddie Brock as Venom anymore. I was done with Eddie Brock as Venom. Donny Cates made me care about Eddie Brock as Venom. So if anybody was going to turn this thing around, it was going to be Donny Cates. And I went into this thing and I was enjoying it, but I was kind of lost. Because I read the Venom books in trade, so there's a lot of stuff, or at least not that much stuff, basically just the War of the Realms stuff and all those little one-shots that they had recently that I missed out on. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, but I know about Null, I know about this thing, I know about that thing. I'm fully caught up. I know that Eddie Brock has a son who he's been lying to and telling him that he's actually his older brother. So that's a very interesting character dynamic in there. Oh man, can't wait to see what happens with that. I know about Null. Null is this awesome brand new villain that they've introduced. Can't wait to see what happens with him when he gets mixed up with Carnage. But there was something that happened over in this one shot that had to do with Carnage being resurrected. This book almost doesn't explain that at all. And I feel like that is a huge problem in this issue. Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there who are only going to be reading the Venom books, not the Venom one-shot tie-ins, not those little Web of Venom series that they put out there. I think there's a ton of people who don't know anything about what's happening in those books. And this book, it gives you a basic explanation of it in passing, like while the events are happening. Like they mentioned, okay, Carnage is looking for little tiny bits of DNA of each of the symbiotes that have been left in every single person who has ever worn a symbiote. He's trying to get all those pieces together, and that's called the codex. If he can reassemble the codex, he can reestablish a connection with Null, wake Null up, and then we basically have a planet-sized symbiote coming down to Earth. That's a huge problem. We're all doomed. So it's like, okay, all right, I understand that. Wasn't Carnage dead? Like, wasn't that thing that happened in here? And then, like, very quickly in passing, they mentioned, oh yeah, he got resurrected by some cult that worships him. Was that the cult that was in the Carnage series? Is that the same cult? Like, why? Hold on. I feel like I need more information on that. So, I feel like for a book that's this big and cost $8, which I'll get back to that in a second, but for a book this big, that's kicking off a big event, I don't feel like they did the best job introducing us to what was happening with this character. I don't feel like they did the best job of getting everybody caught up to where they need to be when this begins. So already right there at the beginning, I kind of had my brakes pumping just a little bit, going, okay, well, I like this idea of Carnage is the one who's basically like the Herald of Null. That's a good thing to do with him. But what the heck is this Cult of Carnage thing? What's that over there? And that's just me speaking as someone who has just been following the main Venom series and not the tie-in Venom books. I feel like if you have not been following the main Venom series and you just want to check this out because, hey, I just like Carnage, hey, it's some big event, it's going to affect Miles Morales in some way, I've been following his book and I'm enjoying that, so I want to check this out and know what's going to happen with that. I really wonder how lost you might be in this, because I know that Venom basically had his symbiote get mentally shredded, is the best way that I can say it. He basically had his symbiote kind of lose all sentience to it, and then it got separated from him by Malekith, who had it as a sword to try and recreate the sword that Null created, the all-black sword, and then that got this symbiote to now reawaken and then come back and find Eddie, and they, like, explain all that just almost in the exact same way that I did. Like with that exact same level of finesse that I just explained all that stuff. They're like, alright, here, you're all caught up on that stuff. And that's not even something that happened in like a previous issue. The re-establishing between Eddie Brock and the symbiote, like the two of them come back together and the symbiote is now reawakened and he's all fine again. That happens in the beginning of this issue and they're just like, oh yeah, it was magic, something, whatever. I really feel like there needed to be an issue 0. This is one of those events that normally when there's an issue 0, a lot of the times I will point at and go, yeah man, you didn't need an issue 0. There's no point to this. The events that happen in here should have been the events that happened in issue number 1. You could have shortened it just a little bit, then put a bunch of other stuff there at the end of the issue, make it feel like a big, rich, full issue number 1. I look at this thing and go, okay, if this is issue number 1, you kind of need to take a few of the things here, like Eddie getting reconnected with the symbiote, the symbiote's now being reawoken, and a lot of the backstory on what's happening with Carnage, and kind of reintroducing people to this whole cult of Carnage thing. That really needed to happen in issue 0. That needed to be the thing that, alright, issue 0 is here just to get everybody caught up on what's going on, and then get everybody to the starting line. But when it comes to this book, it feels more like everybody just looked at their watches and went, oh man, we were supposed to be at the starting line by now. Everybody, we got a race to run. Everybody get in position right now. That's exactly how it kind of felt at the beginning of this. It just felt too rushed to me, and it caused it to have kind of a jumbled beginning in my mind. However, as soon as Carnage shows up, everything feels streamlined. As soon as Carnage shows up, it feels like, alright, now it has begun. Now this is an actual thing. Now this is not us catching up anymore. No more explanations. The story has started, and then the flow is way better. And honestly, I really enjoyed a lot of the places that this went. Because Venom ends up fighting against Carnage. Carnage is way stronger now. He's got no way of defeating him. So he has to escape with his kid slash brother. I don't really know how we should be referring to him in this situation. But he takes him to Spider-Man's apartment. And I love that this kind of continues where their relationship left off at the end of Dan Slott's run, Spider-Man. Where they now finally kind of have this unlikely alliance. They've had that before, but before it was always like, well, yeah, Eddie, you're kind of a monster. It was always like Spider-Man looked at Eddie as Venom, and Venom looked at Spider-Man as, alright, I guess I won't eat you yet. But in this situation, when you have Eddie sitting down for lunch with Spider-Man, and Spidey is just trying to talk to him about what the heck is going on right now, it feels more like two humans talking. It doesn't feel like Spider-Man and Venom talking, it feels like Peter Parker and Eddie Brock talking. And I love that. Another thing that I absolutely love about this is just the way that Donny Cates writes Spider-Man. You guys know me, I mention this all the time, but I spent a decade of Spider-Man just being a flat-out clown. And I like the way that Donny Cates is writing him. It's kind of the same way that Nick Spencer is currently writing Spider-Man, where, yeah, he makes jokes, but he knows when to be serious about stuff, and he knows how to be serious about stuff. When Spider-Man is coming in here and going, okay, what is the deal with the kid right now? You gotta tell me. We gotta get this all on the table right now. It was refreshing to see Spider-Man being the adult in the situation. I love whenever we have a situation like that. And again, I know it is a small thing, but again, I was starving for that for a decade. It feels good to finally be able to eat again. So yeah, I thought that scene was wonderful. I enjoyed that. There's even this great little moment that kind of shows the superhero relationship between the two of them that the two of them have, where these robbers come into the place where they're eating, and the two of them just have that moment where they just stare at each other like, you want to take this one? Nah, you take that. I like it because it shows that even though they have this rocky past, they are two guys who work with each other now. I guess that's the best way to sum it up. I enjoy seeing this new dynamic between these characters, and as I said, that's kind of what Dan Slott teed up there at the end of his run. I am happy to see that Donny Cates, I'm combining all the D-name writers out there, that Donny Cates is continuing that. I enjoy that. That was great. So they have to build this thing that can extract the codexes from all the people out there who still have some of it in them. So they have to find somebody out there who is building something to contain the symbiotes already, because Peter mentions in there, man, it would take a long time to build something like that. Even somebody like Reed Richards would take a week to be able to build something like that. And Eddie just goes, somebody like Reed Richards, huh? I think I know someone. They take him over to the Maker, the evil alternate reality version of Reed Richards, which, by the way, I am stunned that they found a way to incorporate that guy into a Venom book, and it feels natural. Like, think about that for a second. Venom, evil alternate reality Reed Richards. Those are two characters who really don't feel like they should be in any storylines together. Like, their paths would never interact. They have their paths interact for a very good reason in the Venom book. It makes 100% sense, and I actually now have gotten to that point where I look forward to any time that the two of them end up interacting. So they go to him and goes, oh yeah, I've been building that thing for months now. I've been trying to capture the symbiotes this whole time, so yes, you can come to me. I've already got the thing ready to go. And there is a weird moment in here, though. There is a weird moment where Spider-Man goes up to him and just goes, well, if you're anything like our Reed Richards, then it's a pleasure to meet you, and oh, I'm sure that you'll be plenty smart enough to help us out with this. And I had that moment where I thought, wait a minute, didn't he interact with him during Secret Wars? Doesn't he, like, know about him at least, like, a little bit? Like, doesn't he know about him from Secret Wars? I could have sworn that all of them were there stranded on Doom World for like a couple weeks. But then again, that brings me back around to the question that I have had for years now of who remembers what from the Secret Wars, which is something that Marvel has never actually addressed and drives me freaking nuts. Yeah, I complain a lot about how DC just kind of has a bunch of storylines happen and then goes, don't worry about it, don't think about how any of this makes sense, just have fun with it. I kind of want to know how any of this stuff makes sense. Marvel has a huge one over there that's just been sitting there for a long time. And every now and again, a writer will come in here and go, well, you know, people might have some memories of this thing that happens in there, sort of, not really, that's as vague as I can make this. But then another writer will come in here and go, no, nobody has any memories of that. So yeah, it drives me freaking nuts that they never actually address any of this stuff. But that's a side rant, that has nothing to do with this. So what our heroes have to do now is they have to find everyone who's ever had a symbiote attached to them and extract their codexes before Carnage can find them and extract them first. And there's a great moment in this story in which there's a TV on in this restaurant, and Venom looks up and goes, turn that up, turn that up. And it's a breaking news story about a giant mass grave that was found, and they're reading off the names of some of the people who were in the mass grave, including General Thunderbolt Ross, which means that this is even tying into the current stuff going on in the Hulk book. And yeah, there's going to be a Hulk tie-in to this, which, again, I'm going to talk about all the tie-ins in just a moment. But Venom is looking at this and goes, these are people who have been connected to symbiotes before. Carnage did this to send us a message, to let us know he's way ahead of us. We are trailing far behind in this race. He's already 2/3 of the way there at this point. He did this to freak us out. And it's working because I'm freaking out. So they have to find out who they can possibly still get to in order to extract their codexes. And remember, at the end of Dan Slott's run, he had the Carnage symbiote get on Norman Osborn, and Norman Osborn even put some of that on Normie Osborn, his grandson. So they go to Normie Osborn, and they're about to put him in the machine, and then they're like, wait a minute, do we know if this is going to be safe for this little kid? And the Maker's kind of taunting them, going, oh gee, if only there was some adult out there that we could use, so I wouldn't have to test this on some poor child. And I thought they were going to have Spider-Man get in there. I thought Spidey was going to go, alright, time for me to step up, time for me to be a superhero, and take one for the team, because listen, I had the Venom symbiote on me first. I definitely got some codex inside me, so yeah, have me sit in this thing, take it out of me, because I'm the superhero, I'm the good guy, I'm the one who should make this sacrifice. But they didn't, so I found that odd, but then you gotta stop and think like, oh yeah, if Spider-Man has something go wrong in this machine, he's out of commission, and now Venom is in a lot of trouble. So there was another person they could go to, and it was Norman Osborn. Of course, because he gave it to Normie, that of course means he had it, so they go over to Ravencroft Asylum, which, by the way, I love that Ravencroft Asylum is coming back. We have not seen Ravencroft Asylum in forever, and I remember when I was a kid, I looked at that and just went, do you know how many crazy nut jobs there are in the Marvel Universe? Yeah, there needs to be an Arkham Asylum style thing in the Marvel Universe, and no one has touched that in like 20 freaking years. I'm glad that's coming back. So they go there, and they're about to get Norman Osborn, who is still nuts. He's still got Cleus Cassidy's like brainwave patterns inside his head, so he thinks he's Cleus Cassidy, not Norman Osborn. Yeah, it got kind of weird at the end of that storyline. But they go to him. Hello, car outside. They go to him. I don't even know if you guys heard that or not. They go to him, and while they're in there, Cletus comes in. And he comes in, and he's singing this song, and he starts like splitting off little tiny, they almost look like talons. I know they were supposed to be like maggots, but they were drawn almost like little talons, like little claws. And he was flicking them out at some of the inpatients there and infecting them and turning them all into like his Carnage children. And so now it came down to Spider-Man and Venom having to team up to protect Norman Osborn from Cleus Cassidy. And I actually really enjoyed how this event ended with this big standoff here at Ravencroft Institute for two reasons. One is because, as I said, I kind of like Spidey being serious at times. I kind of like seeing writers who actually recognize everything that Spider-Man can do, and they're not afraid to put him in these situations where he does have to get serious. Again, I like Spidey being joking. That's his defining trait. It's something that is important to constantly show off about him, but if he's always jokey, he becomes one-dimensional. It's good to show him getting serious at times, and that's one of the things that I've enjoyed about Spider-Man's portrayal in this series so far, is that we have seen him being the adult in the room, but there was a moment in there in which they're trying to find out a way out of the building, and Venom just goes, dude, you're super strong. Use your strength. He says it way more refined than I do. He just said it way better than that. But Spidey just webs up his fist and starts trying to punch his way out of this building. I love that, because so many people forget that's something that Spidey could actually do. But this was also an asylum that was made to hold people with superpowers. Yeah, it's not easy. So it didn't really amount to anything, but it was a nice scene to show how desperate this situation was, and also just to show different sides to Spider-Man. To show, yeah, occasionally he's got to get serious and do something like this. But he couldn't do it because that's how big and bad this prison is. But the other reason why I like how this book ended was because of the tone. And that's something that I've been trying to avoid talking about with this entire book, because it was all leading up to this moment here. This thing ends like a horror movie. This thing ends totally leaning into the horror element of this story. And if you know Donny Cates is right, he's no stranger to horror. He's done some horror stuff before. Not really heavy horror, but stuff with heavy horror influences, if that makes sense. Like he's done the Redneck series over at Image. Redneck is all about vampires living in Texas. There's heavy horror elements in there. But at its core, it's more about just, this family in this very bizarre situation. It's not really meant to be a horror series, but the horror elements in there are important. So it was kind of good to see him flexing those horror muscles on this book. And that is also reflected a lot in the art. And not so much in the fact that Ryan Stegman really knows how to draw horror, but he really knows how to set up a horror setting. Like, it's constantly raining wherever they are. And the coloring in this leans heavy into darker grays and a lot of shadows wherever they go. Yeah, this entire book is drawn to make it feel creepy. And I think they did a wonderful job with that, and it all worked together with Donny Cates' writing on here. This was a book where they tried to go, Carnage is supposed to be scary. And that is the thing I have to applaud this book for the most. As I started this thing off by saying, I know that Carnage and Venom are different. I grew up in the 90s when everybody knew how different Venom and Carnage were. They were absolutely two different sides to the same symbiotic coin. However, as time has gone along, you look back at them and you're like, yeah, I know they're different, but you need to kind of spice it up a little bit more. You need to kind of define how different they are a little bit more. You need to separate them even more. Give Carnage more of his own identity other than the, I'm the even more evil Venom. You need to do something with him that makes him stand out with his own personality more than he already had, because a lot of stuff that made him stand out, it's kind of been muted over the years. We've all started to forget about, and a lot of times that you try and remind us, it's not really that good, so we tend to ignore it. Yeah, you need to come in here and remind us why Carnage is different, or completely redefine him as something different. And that's exactly what this book did, because this book came in here and said, Carnage is the horror villain. Carnage is the Spider-Man and Venom villain who is the scary guy. And that's exactly what this book did. And that does make him stand out more. And yeah, he was scary in the past, but he was scary in that 90s slasher style, which yes, there was some scary 90s slasher films out there. But it's not really the 90s anymore. So if you're going to still make him the horror guy, you gotta update him a little bit. You gotta lean a little bit harder into that, because as I said, that's what he was at one point, but over time, a lot of the people were just kind of rewrote him as, yeah, he's Red Venom. This book came in here and went, no, he is not Red Venom. He is the big scary monster. He is the thing in your closet. He is the thing underneath your bed. He is what if Junji Ito had to come up with a Spider-Man villain. That's basically what he is, and I'm not just saying that simply because he now has a giant spiral on his face. No, he is like a J-horror monster. He is like some creepypasta urban legend thing. I enjoyed that. They completely redesigned him, so that now he's this big skeletal structure. He's standing taller. You can see his rib cage and just the spine connecting the bottom and top half of his body. It's a great redesign to him that really does make him feel a lot scarier. And there are moments in here where they had to get the symbiote off him, and you see he's basically just a skeleton underneath there, which is great. Because you look at that and go, oh my god, I don't know how we can stop this thing, because even if we get the symbiote off him, I mean, the symbiote's just him at this point. He is the big monster right there. And yeah, anytime that you would see that symbiote start to come up and you just see his like rotting flesh underneath there, that's like some Jason Voorhees style stuff. That's not Venom. That's not just, hey, it's another guy with a symbiote on him and he's a big monster, ooh, and he's even crazier than Venom. No, that is a big, crazy horror monster, which is different from what Venom is. So I really did enjoy how this entire series seems to almost be not so much about reminding us, oh hey, Carnage, he's cool, right? It's about redefining what makes Carnage cool. It's about taking that stuff that worked for him and completely reimagining it, but in a way that still stays true to what he was in the first place. He was scary. Let's make him even more scary. Let's lean into the scary part. Let's make that his defining characteristic. It's working. Carnage, I can now say 100%, anybody who reads this is not going to walk away from it going, yeah, Carnage is just read Venom. So, am I excited to continue reading this event? Ooh, this is when we get to Marvel being Marvel. This is when we get to that part where I have to stop and go, yeah, the story was pretty darn good. It was also $8. So, yeah. And I know that some people are going to come in here and go, yeah, but it was 60 pages, so that's almost the size of 3 whole comics. So, you know, that's like $12 worth of material inside of an $8 package. True. True. Absolutely true. Yes, I will come in here and I will admit, yes, this is a lot of pages for those $8. And there's no like backup story. There's no like little side story they threw in there. There's no like fun little onesie side shot thing that's just there solely to fill in more pages. Because that's something I've complained about for a long time whenever Marvel charges you $4.99 or $5.99 for a book. That the main story is basically the size of a regular issue, and then there's just a whole bunch of side things there in the back that aren't that important and you weren't asking for. But now you have to look at it and go, well, I guess they're in there, so I guess I kind of have to pay to get all of them. Is there any way that I can just like go on Marvel's website and just say, I only want to read these pages, just charge me for those pages? No, there's way to, no way to do that. Okay, all right, sure. Yeah, this is not that. This is a full 60 pages of material for this book. However, as I am sitting here and describing everything that happened in this issue, I'm having to stop and go, did this thing actually need to be 60 pages? Does this set, like, what I just described here does not feel like I described 3 books worth of material. It feels like you could have shortened this a bit. In fact, I remember when I was reading this and I got to the end of it, I just sat there and went, wait, so you charged me $8 for like 40 pages worth? That's terrible. How could you do it? Oh, this was 60. Oh wow, that did not feel like 60. I seriously thought this was only like 40, maybe 48 pages tops. Yeah, this did not feel like a 60-page book. It just sped right on by. It felt like you really could have edited this thing down. So yeah, $8, that's kind of just Marvel being Marvel. And I'm not really a fan of it. I do think that this thing is, I don't want to say ripoff, I really don't. But it's definitely an inflated price. It definitely feels like it did not need to be this long in order to cost you this much money, even if it was well written and did look very nice. Yeah, I do not feel like this needed to be that many issues. And I saw people online defending this by saying, well, again, it's the size of 3 issues for the price of 2 issues. That is a good deal. Yeah, but I honestly kind of wish that you had taken some of these pages out, turned them into an issue 0 to get everybody caught up, and then had an issue number 1 that was not the size of 3 issues, but instead you had like an issue 0 that was the size of 1 issue, and then issue 1 that was the size of like 2 issues, and then I could pick up the issue 0, and if I read that and went, oh, I don't really want anything to do with this, I would just have saved myself money because I wouldn't have had to have kept reading this thing. I mean, I would have had to have kept reading this thing for you guys so I could come in here and talk about it. But But, yeah, I feel like for the average customer out there, this is a bit of a ripoff. It did not need to be this many pages in order to cost you that much money. And coming up, there are a ton of tie-in issues. There's the Scream series, the Separation Anxiety series, the Miles Morales series, Deadpool's getting a series, Hulk is getting a one-shot in there. I think some of these series might be one-shots, but I know a lot of them are like 3-part series. Yeah, they don't need to exist. You can absolutely tell this thing just focusing on Venom and Spider-Man, going around trying to find these characters, and then you have Carnage chasing them down. You do not need to give us side stories focusing specifically on the characters who they're going to be chasing down. Like, we haven't even begun those, and I already feel confident coming in here and going, I see no reason for this. Yeah, this is absolutely Marvel coming in here and just being Marvel. Just coming in here and going, yeah, it's an event, and you gotta buy all those tie-in issues. I really don't think that any of these tie-in issues, I can't say they're not going to be necessary, but I can say you can absolutely tell the story that you're trying to tell in here without side stories. They might not do it. They might make those side stories absolutely mandatory, but I can tell you right now, based on the setup for this, everything you could possibly want to say about this story, you could tell in one storyline with no tie-ins. But this makes them more money. Now, in all fairness, with War of the Realms just a couple months ago, I was reading the tie-in issues for that, and I was having a good time with it. I was enjoying it. However, I never once came in here and said to myself, oh, I have to read these tie-in issues to understand what's happening. I've spoken about this many times before, but that should not be a thing. You can read the tie-in issues to give you a little bit better understanding of something, but it shouldn't be necessary to understand the main story, and I think that War of the Realms did that well. I just read those tie-in issues because I was really enjoying War of the Realms, and I wanted more of it. And these tie-in issues gave me more of it, which I honestly kind of feel is what the point of tie-in issues should be. You really like this thing? We'll give you even more of it to enjoy. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who absolutely love Absolute Carnage. You are going to fall head over heels in love with it. So if you do that, and you say to yourself, okay, I would like some more of this, please. I would like some more symbiote people, please. I would like some more 90s nostalgia coming back at me, please. If you want to do that, cool. I'm not going to judge. Go for it. But again, when you have an event that is so much smaller than something like, say, War of the Realms, when you have an event that is only really focusing on one specific line of books, it does feel kind of cheesy to me to come in here and try and make so many tie-ins. So it is kind of frustrating, but Marvel gonna Marvel, everybody. I don't know. But there you go, everyone. Those are my thoughts about Absolute Carnage #1. I did enjoy it. I just kind of felt like, you know, maybe it was asking a little bit too much of us to invest in that big of an issue that cost that much. And it did feel like it could have been sped up, it could have been paced a little bit better, and the beginning of it a little bit jumbled in there. So yeah, pacing had some problems with it, but I did really like the tone of it. The artwork looks great. I think they're setting up some really cool stuff, and Donny Cates has got an amazing track record on Venom, so even if I did have a couple of complaints here at the beginning, I'm willing to cut him some slack simply because, hey man, he's proven himself time and time again on this book, so cool, I'm behind it. But yes, if you want to check that book out, then let us know what you thought about it in the comments down below. When the entire thing is all said and done, we will come back and have another report for you guys about how we felt the entire thing wrapped up. And again, if you guys want to see the conversation that we have about the most recent 2 issues of Power of X and House of X, we'll be doing that next week over on the Patreon page. And don't worry, we will be coming back and talking about future episodes of House of X and Power of X. We're just gonna wait until maybe a big game changer. But this is one of those series where after every single issue, I'm like, I kind of need to talk to someone about this thing. I kind of have that itch that I need to just get these thoughts out of my head, so we're going to do that over on Patreon. But you guys can also follow us around the web on Twitter and Twitch at Professor Thorry. And like I said, if you are in the New York area this weekend, then you can come and find us over at FlameCon. And if you want even more material from us, then check out Thorry's Arcade, our new gaming channel. There, I think that is all the self-promotion that I could possibly think of, all said and done. Hope you guys enjoy it. I'm not talking again for an entire week. Bye, everyone.